Good morning. Hello, how are you? This is Elizabeth Estel, Homeschool Christian Mom, and I'm so glad you could join me this morning. I'm tackling a big subject today because I'm talking about homeschooling and meeting state requirements. And so if you have the next 4 hours, we can talk about that. Just kidding. We're not going to do that. I'm going to really be directing a lot of your questions to the website homeschoollegaldefenseassociation.org. It's an organization that has been around for many years protecting the rights of homeschoolers. And if you are worried about it, if you are in a high regulation state, I highly recommend that you join them. And I recommend that you join them anyway, because if you have any problems during the school year, they cover your legal bill for just that first price that you pay. Now in New York State, the New York State LEA homeschooling group has a special deal partnership with them, so you can get 15% off your membership once you've joined a LEA group, and I imagine a lot of other states do too, so you might want to check into that with your local co-op or homeschooling group. But it is a fantastic organization, and if you have any trouble, they come quickly to your aid, which is so wonderful. But I did do a lot of research about homeschooling and meeting your legal requirements. Now I'm in New York, so it's considered a highly regulated state. New York is covered under non-public education, which is good and bad. So there are a lot of regulations, but if we follow the regulations, there's no reason for them to question us. So as long as you follow those regulations, you're in the safe zone. There have been problems with overzealous superintendents and school districts and even some sheriffs, which is very unfortunate, and it has added a lot of stress to homeschooling. What if this isn't in compliance, or what if that isn't in compliance? And I'm sorry about that, but generally, if you follow your state's requirements, there's no need for alarm. And if you're a member of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they can come to your aid if there are any problems. So I would highly recommend that you join them. I'm going to take a brief technical timeout here. I don't have my light plugged in, and maybe that will help a little bit. Hello, thank you for joining me. Please put down what state you are in, because that will help us to know what states we should be talking about today. Because I'm in New York, I'm going to mention New York. If you can homeschool in New York, I sort of feel like you're okay anywhere, because that's the hard state to homeschool in. So I looked at the map at Homeschool Legal Defense. There are 10 states where no notice is required. There are low regulation states, 16 of them, and there are very high regulation states, all of which are in the Northeast: New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Thank you for joining me. Glad to see you. I'm talking about homeschooling and meeting your state requirements today. New York is a high regulation state. I'm just going to talk about some of these other high regulation states, and you can see what kinds of things are required. So in Vermont, there's one option for homeschooling. You do have to have a written notice to your school. You do have to have an acknowledgement of compliance that you receive back from the school. You have to teach required subjects. They're very general. And you have to have an assessment, which means some kind of testing at the end of the year. In Pennsylvania, you're required to homeschool for grade ages 6 through age 18. Pennsylvania is interesting because it has immunization requirements for even homeschoolers. So that's something that's a little different. In Pennsylvania, there are 4 homeschooling options. You can homeschool under the homeschool statute. You can homeschool with a private tutor. You can homeschool as a satellite of a religious day school, or you can homeschool as a satellite of an accredited day or boarding school. So that's a little interesting and different there. In Massachusetts, you're required to have a notice of intent. You have to have your curriculum listed, the hours of instruction. You have to say what kind of workbooks or textbooks you're using. You have to also say something about the competency of the parents to teach. Now, I thought that was interesting. You're the parents. You should be able to teach, right? They're your kids, and you know what best to do about that. So, what is that? Basically, you just have to say you're a responsible person, that you're going to follow the mandates of the state and make sure your kids get taught what they need to get taught. You have to show the method of assessment that you're going to use. There are required subjects. You need to do good record keeping. Now, that's not in the legal statutes, but that's a recommendation by Homeschool Legal Defense, and I recommend that for all homeschools. Keep good anecdotal records. This can be just your daily calendar. We did school today. Or you can say field trip, or you can, whatever it is. But you just need to keep good records that you can keep somewhere later in a folder and say, yes, we did our homeschooling today. And you need to test as required by your state. So that's Vermont, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. In New York, there's only one option for homeschooling. It includes the ages 6 to 17. You do have to give a notification to your school. So you give a letter of intent by July 1st. Now, the New York State school year goes from July 1st to June 30th every year, which is why they picked that date, or 14 days after starting your school year. So you have a little leeway there. They have an IHIP that you have to put in, which is an individualized home education plan. And that's by August 15th, or within 4 weeks of receiving your IHIP from your school district, whichever date is later. Okay, so what's that mean? That means you're going to have your child's name, age, grade, the list of subjects you're teaching, and what's included in those subjects. And you're going to say, these are my testing dates. Some people get all freaked out by testing dates, but you're going to pick 4 testing dates during the year for your quarterly reports. November 15th, January 10th, March 20th, and I usually put my last quarterly report due at the very end of June, since that's the end of the school year, June 30th. And you can say, those are my quarterly testing dates. It's not any magic formula of how many days you've done. You just want to pick 4 dates spread out throughout the school year. And then you're going to maintain some kind of records of attendance. And that can just be on your calendar. Yes, we did homeschooling today. Check mark, check mark, check mark. That's our record of attendance. And then you're going to do a substantial equivalent of 180 days of school. Now, a lot of these school curriculums, homeschool curriculums that you buy, they have about 180 days of lessons. Or they have 165 days of lessons, and then they have some extras you can put in there. Now, why the discrepancy there? Well, federal holidays are counted. You don't have to worry about sick days the way a public school would do. You want to get through your books, and so you're meeting all those requirements for your subjects. In New York, you also have to say you're doing 900 hours of school from grades 1 to 6, or yes, 1st through 6th grade every year, and then a 990 hours per year for grades 7 through 12. And so they have it all divided out by minutes, like 42 minutes of this and 32 minutes of that. And that's okay. That's all wonderful, but basically you're doing 1 lesson in each subject every day. Now, if your child is a 7th or 8th grader and is getting done in under 2 hours, you need to get a more rigorous curriculum. You need to challenge them. Don't just let them get away with that. I know there's a lot of wasted time in public school, but don't you waste your child's time. There's a lot to learn out there. Push them. Get them going. Get a good, vigorous curriculum and get them ready for college and life. We're not just wasting our lives homeschooling and doing it because it's easy. There's a lot of wonderful things out there. I pushed all my children, as much as I could. They did 4 years of math, 4 years of science, 4 years of history, 4 years of English and language, as much Spanish as I could get in them, or other. I did music, I did singing music, I did instrumental music, I got them in piano. I did as much as I could with them. Why? Because we don't know what the Lord has for them later. And you want them to be ready for whatever that is. You want them to be good soldiers. That's a biblical reference in the Lord's army. And in our case, we wanted our kids to be like special forces in the Lord's army. We wanted them to be well prepared. So if your child is at least a C student, maybe even a C minus student, do a college prep curriculum with them. Get them ready for whatever is coming. So I just want to encourage you. Homeschooling is great, and there is flexibility. And in some ways it is easier. In some ways it's 100 times harder. So don't be discouraged. Keep going, and you can meet these state requirements. Now, there are some teacher requirements for New York State. The state has mandated subjects, and they are divided by K through 12, 1st through 6, 7 and 8, and 9 through 12. So what is all that about? Well, sometimes they have things like bicycle safety they want you to talk about at a certain age. Or they want you to talk about don't do illegal drugs. And sometimes it's just a very introduction, and sometimes it's please discuss with your children the effects of illegal drugs on society. So it's age appropriate that you're doing these different teachings. And then for assessments in New York State, for grades first through third grade, you can do a written narrative or a test. You can, in 4th through 8th grade, every other year you can test. And in 9th through 12th grade, it's every year you test. So for some grades, you can do a parent-led test. For other grades, you have to have a tester for standardized testing. I really don't recommend doing first and second standardized testing with the Iowa test because it takes so long. But I do recommend starting in 3rd grade testing. Why? Because testing is it's a skill of its own. There are tricks to testing well, and you want to get your student learning those tricks, and you want to teach them how to test well, and you want to teach them, okay, you can take out these 2 answers you know are wrong, and it's a choice between these 2, and how do you eliminate the wrong one? And when they're teaching spelling, okay, we know this pattern is not usually in the English language. We usually don't have double A's in our letters. So C-A-A-T is not going to be the correct spelling for cat. It's going to be C-A-T. And even though K does make the K phonics sound, we don't use that. The correct spelling of cat is C-A-T. So you would fill in the little circle for that answer. So we're all going to work together through whatever requirements you have for your state. Make sure you know those requirements and know how best to meet them. Now in the New York State, under Homeschool Legal Defense or under New York State LEA, they have a copy of the regulations manual, and they also have examples and example forms for you. And I'm sure that is true in a lot of other states as well. And if you're a member of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they have the sample forms that you can use as well. And I recommend this. Now, some moms are very concerned that they're not writing enough and doing enough and saying enough. And so they want to fill out 3 or 4 pages. The Homeschool Legal Defense does not recommend that because you don't want your state to have to require that later. So you're doing the minimal amount that they're requiring. You're doing it in a very effective, efficient way, and you're just providing what they're requiring, and that's it. You don't go on and on. Now, if they say, what are you teaching in history, 3rd grade history? You turn to the table of contents and you look what they're teaching. Oh, they're teaching the period of American independence. They're talking about these 3 wars. They're talking about how the colonists lived. They're talking about whatever, farming in the 1700s. And that's what you have to put down. You don't have to make up something yourself. You just put down what is in that table of contents and you've met the requirements. I hope this has been very helpful for you. If you're watching on a replay, please give me a hashtag replay and put down what your
what state you're in. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. I do have 4 open slots. If you need some extreme ninja support and encouragement for your homeschooling, you can contact me at HomeschoolChristianMom. Work with me. I'll put the link in the below in the comments for you. And behind me, I have the biblical worldview text from BJU Press Homeschool. I highly recommend it if you're homeschooling. We need to be giving our biblical values across to our students as well as their other academic subjects. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. as well. Bye.